Welcome to EdTech Speaks, a podcast bringing guests together to share their expertise and advice on navigating business and education in a technology-driven world. From entrepreneurs to vendors, higher education to corporate leaders, we'll uncover their perspective regarding the latest trends and technologies impacting your career or business. Our podcast is made possible by Downing EdTech Consulting, where people and technology connect. Hosted by Cher Downing, an experienced executive spanning a higher education and corporate career with specific focus on the EdTech industry. Dr. Downing is also an international and national presenter, author, and regular media contributor. Now here is your host, EdTech strategist, Dr. Cher Downing.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to EdTech Speaks, a podcast where we bring guests to share their expertise and knowledge on navigating business education in a technology-driven world. I'm your host, Cher Downing, and today I want to introduce our guest, Laura C. Wells with Awake Teams. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Cher. Great to be here.
So excited to have you on here. To my listening audience, Laura and I have met before, and we have talked about her business from really the beginning, from when she first started it. So I'm excited to bring it to you today because it's gotten some traction. Things are moving forward. So Laura, I'm going to let you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your background, and then we'll get into talking about Awake Teams.
Great. Thanks, Cher. So I am the founder and CEO of a burgeoning startup called Awake Teams that Cher mentioned. And prior to this, so immediately prior to creating this startup, I was developing leaders in emotional intelligence inside corporations. I'm a certified trainer, and I was developing leaders at leading companies here in the Bay Area, LinkedIn and Facebook and Uber. And I discovered a couple of things. Employees really want this kind of upskilling. They understand the importance of emotional intelligence for their own development, to become managers, to advance in their career, and also just to feel better at work. Companies seek out these kind of programs to develop their managers and leaders, and they're spending a lot of money. And they would persistently challenge, what actually happened? Our people had a good time. They seems like they connected more, but what actually happened? Were skills developed? Did they stick? What's the impact on the business? And I heard this so often that I decided to create the solution. And part of the reason I decided to create the solution, why do I care about emotional intelligence in the workplace? I started my career, I have an international MBA, and I started my career in consumer packaged goods brand management. So worked in Fortune 100 companies, brands you all know, on M&Ms and Colgate. I worked at Disney in France. And my final corporate role was doing global brand development with Dove, so at Unilever. And I got to work on that Women in White underwear campaign, the campaign for real beauty, for the launch of Dove body lotion. And so amazing. I got to the place that I wanted to in my career. I worked in both the US and in Europe, and now at this point had a global role. And I decided to leave the corporate environment for two reasons. One is that for me personally, I wanted to do work that was more personally meaningful for me. At some point I had to reckon. I've always been an idealist, always, still am, haven't lost it. Some people say you lose it. I haven't lost it. It's different now, but I haven't lost it. And I wanted to contribute my talents to something that really moved me personally. And that's one reason I left. The other reason I left is corporate culture and feeling and seeing and recognizing for myself that I wasn't bringing all of me to work, that there was a good deal of me that got left at the door, and I put on some kind of suit and I showed up and I did my corporate work. And I actually left and went to nonprofit for a number of years. For about 6 years, I took all my great business training and business skills and headed up marketing and communications at a mental health research foundation. And relearned the value of business skills in an environment, in that nonprofit environment that didn't have a lot of MBAs or business skills. And I also got to learn a tremendous amount about the brain and human behavior. It's an organization called the Brain and Behavior Research Foundation. And notably, I learned about neuroplasticity, this amazing ability of our brain to adapt and change throughout life, to create new neural circuitry, and that it used to be thought it stops at about the age 25 or 30. And now there's evidence that throughout our life, we continue to learn and our brains continue to adapt and change. Now, that can work in both directions, unfortunately, right? Like toxic stress can also have a negative impact. Yeah. And we can proactively choose situations and learn new things and keep our brain evolving and developing. And behavior also plays into that. It's not a closed loop. How we behave consistently over time also affects the circuitry in our brain. So we can choose new behaviors, practice them, and then that in itself, the practice, can change the circuitry in our brain, right? We develop new pathways. And I decided to bring this amazing learning back to the corporate world, that corporate culture is not a static thing. We are humans, we are people. Corporations are not people. I know the law in the US says that they are not. We are people inside corporations, and we can choose how we want to behave and connect, and therefore transform corporate cultures into a place where both people and businesses can thrive.
It is so exciting to hear about that. And it was funny because when you mentioned that, I remember when the statistic used to be, you kind of stopped learning at 25. And so you better get everything in by then, because apparently we were just going to be like robots for the rest of our lives and have no ability. And what I always found interesting was people who came from difficult situations. Maybe they had had some time in prison, some sort of situation that was totally opposite of what we consider to be a normal life. Many of those people would be able to get back into the normal life through whatever they did, training, support, mentors, whatever. And so I always thought it was interesting because I thought, well, they had to learn to do this, right? If they didn't have the mechanism before and they're over 25, they had to learn it. So we have to be able to learn something. And then when technology came out, lo and behold, we have people that are in their 70s, 80s, and 90s who are using technology. So clearly they had to learn how to do that and retain information. So we do have that ability. And I think you're so right, because when you step out of work, as we did in the pandemic, all of a sudden we had all of these other nuances we had to learn, and we had to adapt our corporate roles from our living rooms, from our bedrooms, from our kitchen tables. Yeah. And we were able to do it. Big surprise, which is why now people are like, I don't want to go back to the way it was. I like it this way. I like working remotely, or I like hybrid, where I have the best of both worlds. A few days around the water cooler, a few days at home. But I like the difference in how corporate is treating us, in how we're reacting, and how I'm working. It's really been the world's largest lab rat experiment, the pandemic was.
Yes. I mean, it is amazing how we adapt and learn when we're up against a wall, right? Mm-hmm. But then what we hopefully see and learn from that is that we don't have to wait until we're up against a wall. We can proactively learn and develop new skills and practice seeing things in new ways all the time.
And for our listeners, I really want you to hone in also on the fact that Laura has done exactly what many of us that are in middle age have done, which is worked her corporate career, decided it's time for something different, chose to go into nonprofit, which is the exact opposite of corporate work, but you get a learning curve there as well as the ability to use your skills, and then came out of it and created a product that said, hey, this is kind of taking all of my years of experience and pulling them together and all that I've observed and where I know I can offer the most help. And I think our listeners that are toying with the idea of transitioning into something else, or thinking about, do I really want to be an entrepreneur? This is exactly what it's about, which is deciding where your passion is and deciding where that fits, whether it's another role, it's doing your own thing, maybe it's finding a partner to do this with, whatever the case may be. But I think the other thing the pandemic taught us was there's more to life than going to work every day.
Yes, definitely. Yes. And we've only got one time around as far as we know. So let's choose well. So much is happening with these outside storms. I live in the Bay Area. And so these atmospheric river storms and just so much happening around the world. And the pandemic was another one of those things, I think, that also wakes us up. And nothing is really guaranteed. And so how are we feeling about what we're doing today and now? And is there some way we can positively impact what's happening? And if so, what is our way to do that?
Absolutely. So talk to us a little bit about Awake Teams and what the product does and kind of how you go in and establish this with a company and what occurs.
Yeah, so Awake Teams is scalable interpersonal skills development. And it's scalable for two reasons. It's scalable because it's tech enabled. And the why behind that is because I want to scale the impact of this. And so the impact, as we touched on, interpersonal skills. And in our case, we focus on trust, communication, and collaboration skills. So the curriculum is built on that. Year one is the foundational level. And then year two, you do a deep dive. You take one or two of the trust skills, spend 3 months on that. So it's served up in 3-month modules, and we measure impact. And so that's the why of this, is the measured impact. So that frustration that I kept bumping into, our people had fun. They loved it. They probably learned something in that workshop, but what actually happened and how do we justify our investment? And I knew they were right. And also measurement actually really helps learning. We get grades in school. Am I taking this in? Am I integrating the learning? Or do I need to double down here? And so with Awake Teams, we use measurement also to reinforce the learning cycle. So it's accessed online. It is facilitated, but it's facilitated by a world-class trained facilitator in recorded sessions. So the live interaction actually comes from the team itself. These are 4 to 10 people who work together toward a common goal in an organization. That's how we define team. It's very basic. It's also very important. These have to be people you work with that your own success depends at least in part on how you're showing up with these people and what's happening between you. How well are you collaborating? How creative are you? How much innovation is being produced? And so in each 3-month module, we tackle one key interpersonal skill area and then name 5 specific skills. So we have a very specific pedagogical process that we follow in Awake Teams. And you have to name specific skills. It's not general emotional intelligence. It's not, we're raising your EQ in a vague, sort of soft, fuzzy way. These skills are skills. They are hard skills. They are not soft and fuzzy. So we name 5 specific skills in each 3-month module, and then it's very application-based. So you're doing it together with your teammates. You're committed to at least 3 months. And you come together for monthly sessions that are half research-backed content, half interactive practice. You immediately start applying the new behaviors. So the research-backed content would describe why trust in the workplace. What does that even mean? How are we defining it? Why should we care? And then what does it look like? And then you pause and you start doing a very specific exercise with each other. So practicing new behaviors. And within this 5-skill framework, and then we use an anonymous peer assessment that enables us to measure acquisition of those 5 specific skills. And then we also track some engagement and performance metrics. So every month there's a progress report that shows what's happened with these 5 specific skills and what's happening with engagement and team performance. And then in between those monthly team sessions are proprietary peer feedback algorithm. So it generates this progress report every month. And then it also personalizes a sequence of micro modules. So the continuation of our pedagogical model is target specific skills, apply learning, measure progress, and reinforce learning over time. Takes us time as humans. Memory integration takes time. Practicing new behaviors to get out of that terribly awkward phase of doing it for the first time, it takes time for it to become a pathway, a normal way of behaving for us. So that's why the 3-month module, and that's also why we use measurement as part of the learning model. So the peer feedback algorithm generates that progress report and personalizes a sequence of bite-sized learning each week in between those monthly team sessions. So every week, each team member receives a 5-minute micro module. Hey, here's your first growth edge. Start here. Very application based. There are links you can click and read the research if you want. You don't have to. It's literally a 5-minute micro module, and we ask you to practice, in the flow of your work, right? These are behaviors for the workplace, and practice specifically with someone that we've assigned you, a practice partner.
That is excellent, because the first thing that comes to my mind is we're having such a transitional workforce right now. People are moving around due to layoffs, due to choices. I talked with someone last night who said, oh yeah, we just lost someone because we said that they could not continue working remotely. So they made the choice that they don't want to work here anymore. They want to find a remote role, and they left. So, that person will end up somewhere else. But what that does then is at that new location, now there's a fragmented team. And we're seeing that all over the place, where all these people are coming in, moving in, and perhaps management is fragmented a little bit as well, and trying to get a handle on who is their team, what are they doing. So I see this as a real boost right now during this particularly transitional time where we're seeing all of these things go on. And then also, I'm assuming that you are looking at this transition in terms of global teams as well.
Yes, and I would love to underline something that you just touched upon, that individuals leave, right? Or they change teams. And what Awake Teams is able to do is to upskill the individuals, right? So these are the skills these are the same kinds of programs that are being developed typically individually for employees. So the individual employees are getting upskilled. They get to take this new learning and skills with them wherever they go, whether it's a new team, a different team, they walk down the office and they have to participate in another team meeting, or they leave the company. So it's individual upskilling that the individuals get. And what the company gets is, in addition to that, these high performing teams. So with high levels of trust, that with bolstered creativity and innovation. And yes, absolutely. It also works with global teams. And in fact, I'm talking to a customer right now about teams in the US, teams in Europe. And the only trick becomes, which they have to deal with anyway, is these synchronous monthly team sessions. It's just finding the time where they come together and they meet. Otherwise, it doesn't matter where the employees are sitting. This is a structured tool to enable employees to connect more wherever they are. And they get to connect and learn together in a structured way outside of the transaction of doing business together. Right? They then go and practice while they're doing the transaction of doing business, right? There are objectives to achieve, and everybody feels good when they achieve objectives. They want to, right? It's not that the transaction of business is a negative thing. It's that we also do better at that when we bring more connection to it. When we feel like we're in this together, we are working toward a common goal, we understand each other, and we're able to communicate well, we're able to address differences, we're able to manage conflict. These are the kinds of things that Awake Teams develops.
And I think we're seeing more and more companies that are doing more and more teams. We're seeing a much higher level, particularly in the tech field, where you rely on teams to develop products, to develop services, even to brainstorm. What's next? What are we putting out there? And you have to have the comfort in a brainstorming session to not have people laugh at your idea, to make you feel inferior that you suggested something, all of those things. At the same time, we're all human and we come from different backgrounds. And so what is not offensive to one person can be highly offensive to someone else. And if we don't take the time to deal with that, oftentimes as managers, we don't hear about the situation, but it just kind of quietly festers. And then the brainstorming sessions really come down to, out of 4 people on the team, one person does all the brainstorming, and it's only their ideas, which may or may not be the best ideas in the world, but everyone else is afraid to share their information. So it just becomes lopsided as a team. So oftentimes too, you hear when people say, well, our managers don't tell us anything. Well, oftentimes managers tell one person on the team because they're in another meeting together and they're not meaning to slight anyone else. It's just kind of convenience. You're sitting next to me. I talk to you about something else because we've got a few minutes before this meeting starts. Yeah. My hope is you go back and tell the rest of the team. But if I don't articulate that to you, you probably don't. You probably just hang on to that information, not for any particular reason. And then the team feels slighted and left out. So being able to say to that person, we really hate when we don't hear because you always hear everything and we don't get that feedback from you, is really makes it our jobs difficult. Most people won't say that. Most people will just sit there and say, well, we just don't know what goes on here.
Right. You really do have to develop norms together as a team so that all the voices in the room are actually there. All the voices are speaking. There's so much research that demonstrates that team learning magnifies not only the team itself learning, so what kind of innovation, what kind of ideas, how much have we grappled with difference, because ideas get stronger the more they're challenged, right? When it's done in a productive way, that kind of challenging and questioning of an idea makes it bigger, better, and stronger. And sometimes the ideas get left behind through that challenging process and then can morph into something else, but you have to be able to go through the process.
So I think the other conversation that's going on right now is, and it's kind of funny because artificial intelligence has been around for a very, very long time. And we tend not to think of AI, but we use Alexa, we use Siri, we use a GPS, but we never think of that as AI. We just kind of, it's labeled something different. We know it's a product and we just kind of go about our day. Now we're seeing things like Chat GPT and other products that are rolling out quickly. And there's become an instant fear of, is this going to replace people? Or is this going to replace certain types of jobs? And so what are you seeing in terms of, as companies are adopting AI to maybe replace when somebody leaves and they're not able to get someone back in there? How is this going to affect the teams, and how is this going to affect what Awake Teams is doing for them?
Yeah, great question. I was at a conference. I was at the ASU and GSV EdTech conference a few weeks ago, and AI was everywhere. It was the buzz. AI, I mean, it really is dramatically impacting EdTech and future of work, which is right. I land in both spaces with Awake Teams. And what is interesting is that what also was popping up at the conference was the crucial need for human intelligence, right? AI can improve our efficiency, vastly expands what we're capable of because we can do things faster. And we all the more need these quintessentially human skills that we don't want to be roboticized away. So that how do we connect as people? How do we learn to grapple with difference so that our creativity is really including all different perspectives, right? How do we meet the diverse world where it is now? So I think it's super exciting how AI and digitization is also expanding access, right? Especially in school learning environments where tools are available online so that everyone can have access to amazing educational supports in a way that they haven't in the past, right? Especially in the US, right? Zip code dependent. Not anymore with the digitization. And so I'm very excited about how digitization and AI expands access, optimizes efficiency, enables us to put down some tasks so that we can move on to higher order tasks. And remembering this emphasis on these quintessentially human, right? We are the live beings here on the planet, right? That there are certain things that we want to keep for ourselves. And so let's make sure that we're developing those skills too, that we remember when we're connected, when we're collaborating, our potential really is limitless.
Absolutely. And it's funny, because I was at a meeting this week and yeah, AI is all the discussion. But we, as a society, we tend to adopt quickly and question later. And so now we're seeing where AI, particularly with certain products, isn't always spewing out the correct information. It's basically the age old data in, data out. It's only reading and it's only assimilating whatever it is that we've told it to. And so it doesn't have that ability like a human does. So if the AI tells you the sky is green, human says, well, if there's a storm, maybe, but otherwise it would be blue. It doesn't have that ability to do that. I think as companies are looking at adoption of things, they're looking obviously for cost savings and ways to cut corners sometimes. But I think that in some instances they'll regret it and move back. It's not a replacement for people. We know that. But I also think that there's an opportunity to live with AI if we put some more humanistic focus into building it rather than always being just about, oh, it can assimilate all of this data and all of this research. And somebody said the other day, well, we need something. If you ask it a question, it will give you all sorts of information. It will tell you all these places to look and all these things that you can read. And I said, so can Google. And they were like, well, yeah, but it's better than Google. And I said, is it really? I said, because Google has spent years cultivating and validating what's out there to the best of their ability. I said, but I can go into Wikipedia and I can make myself the Queen of England and no one will question it. Because as long as I log in and change it, I have the ability to do that. I said, my point is that's the infancy stage versus the mature stage. And that's kind of where we're at with AI right now. And I'm hopeful that we bring more leaders into the discussion about how do we give it a more humanistic feel and where do we draw the line of this still needs to be people and this needs to be adoption of technology that supports people.
Right. It needs human supervision. Absolutely. Absolutely. And in the case of Awake Teams, our proprietary peer feedback algorithm is a form of AI, right? It's relatively simple now. And I'm very excited about the possibilities of what else we will be able to do with AI that will enhance the learning, right? So again, measurement, analysis. There are machine learning platforms now where you can go into a team Slack channel, for example, and just track and notice what words are they using? How are they interacting with each other in a way that we wouldn't be able to do as humans? It would take us so long.
Right.
That kind of thing could be added on to Awake Teams, right? So we really do. So we're better able to track what's happening in the flow of work with these new skills. Are they practicing? Are they demonstrating them? And then being able to give nudges when we see that they're not, right? But it's in the stream of learning in our case, right? We have so many ways that we'll be able to use AI tools for the benefit of learning and developing skills. It just will improve the efficiency of the process.
Right.
It's like I have heard Johnny Taylor, who's the president of SHRM, say AI plus HI equals ROI. And I really like that. So artificial intelligence plus human intelligence equals return on investment.
Exactly. Because I think about when you have a business, there are certain things you wouldn't just turn over and do. For example, you will hire a CPA to do your books, to do your taxes, to make sure everything is aligned with what's expected of a business. But you wouldn't just go out and, if you were a multi-million-dollar corporation, you wouldn't put everything into something like TurboTax or QuickBooks and then just let it auto-generate out what you need done, right? Because you want to be able to go in and say, no, we took a loss on this. And no, that needs to be depreciated. There's all of those nuances. And the validity of where your bottom line is dependent on working through that process continuously. So the thought of just handing it over and letting it just auto-generate and then being stuck with it because it's part of a bigger process just doesn't work for us. But I think the other thing too is we never know when we need to learn. So we've become continuous learners, but it ebbs and it flows because when I know how to do everything that I'm currently working on, I'm good. And then when something new gets thrown at me, suddenly I need to learn that. And then once I've mastered that, I go back to, okay, I know everything again. So we are continuously taking in information, trying to figure out where it goes. How do we do things better? And it starts to unnerve us a little bit as people. We get a little overwhelmed sometimes. We have some issues with how much is too much that I'm learning, that I'm handling, that I'm taking on. Tell me a little bit about what Awake Teams does to build confidence in these people.
Yeah. So I just want to articulate a thought that just sparked as you were saying that. There's really interesting research on the state of flow. And so flow is when we really prosper in that state. It's almost like a state of bliss where we are contributing in a way that feels natural and powerful at the same time. So I'm not overstrained and I'm not understrained. And what the research demonstrates is that it's at this delicate balance between challenged enough versus over challenged. So if I'm not challenged enough, I'm bored and I'm not realizing my potential. And some part of me knows that. If I'm challenged too much, it's what you describe, is that I'm overwhelmed. And then it's like a stress reaction, which is too much stress is not good for us. But there's this balance of the right amount of stress that we actually need to realize our potential, to feel good, to know we're contributing, we're engaged, we're productive. And so it's exactly finding that balance and tracking for ourselves, right? Having enough self-awareness to notice where am I not, is it not enough, and where is it too much, and how do I find resources to support me when it's too much? And so with Awake Teams, through this social learning model, we've built support into the process. So you're learning together with your teammates, you're practicing together with your teammates, and you're learning ways to give feedback in an objective way, to step in and support, to ask really good questions. So to meet your colleagues as people and to keep in mind this challenge, right? That we don't want to be stagnant. Sure. We don't want to all be nice to each other only. We don't want to have one person who's always got the great ideas, right? We all want to be contributing. And so in Awake Teams, you establish those norms together, and then you have concrete ways of checking in on that and holding each other accountable as a team. Are we doing what we agreed? And when we agreed, everybody's voice was in the room. Let's get everybody's voice back in the room. How are we doing? And did we overstretch ourselves? Was that too much? Or did we understretch? Is there something else we want to add or change? So it's really about creating behavioral norms in a team and having effective and productive ways to hold each other accountable.
So that leads me to having been a manager in a past life. I guess I'm still a manager now, but in a different way. But I think for all of us that have led teams, that have managed teams, that have managed just people, even if they're not in a team, there's always that ability of we need to train them to do better. We need to bring in workshops. We need to send them to something. And then, as you alluded to earlier, we never really have a measurement to say how it went, how they did. Sometimes maybe they get a certificate of completion. Well, that means they sat there all day. I don't really know if they learned anything, but they came back with it and we stick it in the file drawer and we call it good. So talk to us a little bit about, because this is the best part of your product, which is it goes back to not just helping the teams, but it helps the whole company, because now they actually can see what they're investing in, not just in the service, but in the people. They can see the change of the people. And that is always exciting when you see people grow, when you nurture them in a company or in a business, when you have those people that also you retain for a long time because they do so well there and they continue to grow and flourish with you. So talk to us a little bit about the management side of this, what they get back, what they see, and how that impacts them.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So every month in this progress report for each team, the team members also see it, right? I strongly encourage it doesn't only go to the manager, right? That the whole team gets the progress report. That's just part of the transparency and trust building. And so that they see the measurement. And again, it's part of the learning tool. So you see the skills acquisition. So, right, these specific observable behaviors, the 5 in each 3-month module. You see from each team's baseline, how much are they progressing each month? And then you see the engagement scores, and it's within the same data set. So we're not going to the company and saying, hey, can we pull out your engagement data and map the individuals onto this team? It's actually in real time with these skills as they're getting developed, what's happening in engagement and what's happening across key performance metrics. And so that shows up each month in the report. And engagement, the reason why engagement is so important, employee engagement is the most measured people metric, meaning like human resource, human capital metric. It's been around the longest, and there's abundant research that links it to many other metrics for a business. Productivity, right, hits the bottom line directly. Gallup and Forbes have done really interesting work together where they have found, according to Forbes analysis, that companies are losing 20% in lost productivity, so a lost productivity cost of 20% per employee. So it's more for people who are more disengaged, it's less for people who are more engaged, but across a company, because disengagement is so prevalent, 20% of every annual salary. It's just incredible. So by measuring, oh my gosh, yes. And never mind the untapped human potential and how people are feeling, right? We all know how we feel when we know I'm not contributing at my level and I'm not really feeling connected and like my voice is heard and I'm able to be creative. So it's both and. It's the impact on the business, and equally important is how are people feeling when they show up? Right? Not only in engagement or productivity, but also mental health. There are just so many metrics, right, that are tied to employee engagement. So on the management side, they get these reports every month and they can see. And so customers have told me that's the best part. We've never gotten monthly progress reports with data to specific skills that are being acquired from a, quote, soft skills program, right? And we don't like to call them soft skills anymore. Now, some people call them power skills, human skills. I just call them interpersonal skills. and also see, and what is the team saying about how they're performing? So you get to see, here's what we invested, here's what happened. And so in each 3-month module, there end up being 4 progress reports. There are 4 team sessions because you start with a kickoff and then beginning of month 2, beginning of month 3, and then there's a closing session. And after each team session, there's this assessment and the progress report. And so 3 months is enough time for behavior change, right? That is enough time to create a new habit, and it's enough time to see data, right? To see progress. So favorite part is the monthly progress reports because they have data for the first time. And also they really appreciate the collaborative learning. That what I hear is that we're actually, not only are we showing up for the program and completing it, we have 100% completion rate. Not only that, I don't just mean the showing up and finishing, but we're actually holding each other accountable. One leader of a team told me, last week, I got called out in a meeting because I wasn't doing something that was in our norms. And we suddenly had an effective, efficient way to address it and then pivot. And we were back on course, right? And they dared. Yeah. So, right, they dared to correct me. I was the one.
Well, and not only that, but moving back on course. Because how many times has someone actually made the mention of something is not right? And then there is just that hanging in the air feeling of everyone feels uncomfortable. And then there's a resentment that carries beyond that and oftentimes then impacts other things because no one understands how to talk about it. So it just kind of festers and keeps going and keeps going. I always used to really be shocked when someone would talk about something that happened maybe 4 years ago or 5 years ago, but would talk about it with such venom to say, well, we tried that and here's what happened then. And I'm like, wow, you really haven't let go of that. It's one thing to say we tried that project before and we ran into some issues or nobody wanted to do it. But when they just talk about it at a level where you just feel they still are harboring that resentment over it. Yeah. No one ever worked them through that. No one ever helped them deal with that. And then that person gets labeled, they're kind of a resentful person, they're hard to work with, they're difficult, and they're not. You work with them on another project and you're like, this is a great person. Why, you're thinking, sitting there thinking, why have I heard all these things about this person? I'm not seeing any of that. So you're taking that out.
Well, it really requires a high trust environment. You have to have trust with your colleagues in order to be able to have those difficult conversations. You also need to have tools and frameworks and in the ways to have those difficult conversations. And the first step is trust. You have to learn, create an environment of safety within your team so that you can go to the person in a productive way, right? And ask some questions and give them an opportunity to talk about what's going on so that it hopefully doesn't become that embedded resentment, right? That just never got addressed, never had a chance to breathe and be alive. It was like rejected and put away. Yeah.
Well, and that brings me to our final point today, which is talk to us a little bit about what companies need to project in terms of trust, because I could see where if they brought you in and they said, we want you to work in this project as a team, if there's not a trust among the team and the company itself or the hierarchy, there could be a little bit of fear in stepping into this 3-month program.
Yeah. So Awake Teams is a really different model. So they're not bringing me in, right? They purchase a product and the team has a lot of responsibility. So they do come together once a month and they're getting their bite-sized learning every week. So they are definitely getting content and getting shared learning. And there's a lot of team autonomy, team responsibility in this model. So it's less dependence on the external facilitator and much more dependence on the team. And also for the team. So in those progress reports, the team is responsible for the team progress. You can also see individual progress, but the main part of those progress reports is the team. And so how we each are doing is reflected in that team. So it's also shifting that. Again, it is individual upskilling. You can still see individual data. You can see how you're rating yourself versus how your peers are rating you. They're really important learning for the individuals, right? Nobody else can behave except us. We are responsible for our own behavior. And when we're in a team, we've already acknowledged our collective behavior is more important, or is what we're after here, is that we're each showing up first. All our voices are here. And we are contributing as a team. So it also means you're responsible too if somebody's harboring a resentment and it has shut down in the meetings and is no longer contributing. That means this is part of your team. It's going to be part of your team's progress, and you're accountable for that as well.
It's so exciting. Is there anything else you want to share with our audience today? Because we could talk about this all day long.
No, I love this conversation, Cher. Thank you for the great questions. I would just say, please have a look at our website, awaketeams.com. And I am on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out if you have questions. I'm always interested in talking to people in this space. We're looking for additional customers and companies all the time. So companies who are struggling with engagement, team cohesion, and looking for that measured aspect, right? And also looking for a different model that, is scalable. Also, it's a different, you're not paying either for the external facilitator to come in person, right? So it makes it also pricing wise, a scalable model. And so for companies that are looking for a scalable model with data, and with some of that team accountability versus accountability from the facilitator, the external facilitator. So thank you for asking. I think we're in such an exciting time now, both in, as I said, for education at EdTech and what is possible now for all of us. And equally in this future of workspace, I think from the ways that AI is being used in recruiting and hiring to take out bias, so increasing access for people. And then a tool like Awake Teams is helping ensure they stay there when they get there, right? So that all of us all of our voices are there. And that is just so my personal passion, as I started the conversation with. Let's get all of our voices. We all have something important to say and share, and we're there for a reason. Let's make sure that reason gets realized.
And that is so true, because we hired you for a reason. Every single employee we bring into a company, we hired you because we saw something. We were interested in something. You fit something we needed. So we have to take advantage of that. We can't just bring you in and then just sit you there in the corner. So, right. Laura, this has been fantastic. I'm so excited you were here today. Listeners, as you know, we always include all of the contact information also, so that will be available to you online. I want to thank all of you for joining us here today, and know that wherever you listen to your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, Google, you can certainly grab the information there, and you can catch us for other guests as well. If you want to reach out to Downing EdTech, we are at downingedtech.com. So until next time, keep learning.
Thank you for listening to EdTech Speaks with EdTech strategist Cher Downing. To learn more about the services Downing EdTech and its staff can provide you, find us at www.downingedtech.com. If you enjoyed today's podcast, be sure to share it. We'd also like to hear from you regarding any suggestions for topics or guests and the value you received from our show. Check back for new podcasts with featured guests at www.downingedtech.com/podcast.